and welcome to another episode of Los Banos Talk. My name is Justin Collins. Tonight's episode, I'm speaking with two members of our local community, Maria Phillips and Jennifer McQueen, and they're going to be talking to us today about Assembly Bill 1360, which is a relatively new assembly bill that's currently on the floor and being discussed and debated, and it directly affects homeschools and charter schools. And so that's why they're particularly interested in this bill. And we're going to talk about more in just a moment, right after a brief message from our sponsor.
So here we have the commedia, and it has media and onion, cabbage, cilantro.
Meat, and then there's some lime. And we're back. Thanks for watching. So, once again, we're talking about Assembly Bill 1360, which affects homeschool and also affects charter schools. And so, without further ado, Maria, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Maria Phillips, and I run our local Los Banos homeschool co-op, and I'm also one of the leaders for our Grassroots campaign for our district, District 21, in Los Banos, Merced County, and I am partnered up with Aaron Charbrough as well as a leader for this area to fight this bill.
Great. And then, Jennifer, if you as well could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer McQueen. I am a mother of three learners. We use non-classroom based charters. So yes, AB 1316 is extremely important to us. I'm a resident of Merced in Merced County, and I'm really excited to be here talking with you guys.
Great. Okay, so AB 1360. So most people are probably a little unfamiliar with what exactly it is and what exactly it does. So could you kind of give us in a nutshell, Jennifer, what really is it? What's the main points that really got you guys interested in it? What's the main concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much a brief rundown of this assembly bill is it was introduced by Long Beach Assembly Member Patrick O'Donnell, and it was discussed and heard at the California Education Committee on April 28th, and it did pass. And the three main things with this bill that we're really looking at are that it limits the attendance of non-classroom based learners. So if you attend a charter school that's home base is not in the county in which you reside, you will no longer be able to attend. So for a district such as ours, District 21 here in Merced County, that completely eliminates school choice for non-classroom based charter school learners. There is not a single non-classroom based charter available in Merced County. So thousands of learners in District 21 attend a non-classroom based charter where its home base is in Fresno. So under AB 1316, every single one of these learners in the entire Merced County will not have a charter to attend any longer. Another main point of this bill, if it passes, is that it will also reduce 30% of the educational funds that are distributed to our learners. Our charter school is a public charter, and therefore we receive educational funds to assist in all of our learning throughout the school year. So those funds will be reduced by 30%. And the last really big point that affects us is the vendors that we're allowed to use. Currently, our charter has, all the charters have approved vendors where we can use for tutoring, music class, art class, foreign language, all these various additional classes that our learners need to take. This bill says that we will no longer be able to use the services of anybody who is a non-credentialed teacher. So that, for example, means a music teacher of 40 years will no longer to be able to teach our second grade learners, or a math tutor who has worked on nuclear weapons will no longer be able to tutor first grade math. This will vastly affect our community.
So if we're thinking of kind of like the local grassroots movement, if you will, for
Yeah.
this, how did you guys decide to, or I guess walk me through the timeline more or less? At what point were you like, we need to do something, and what is that something you're doing? And the other question is what do you want to see happen? What is the goal with this?
I'll pass that to Jennifer in a second, but every district needs volunteers. That is the biggest thing right now. But really, this kind of snuck up on everybody. All of a sudden, we had members of the co-op like, somebody just sent me this. What is this bill? What is this? And I was flooded with messages, and I'm like, wait a second. Hold on a second. So then I had to go look at it, but that's how snuck up it was. There are still charter schools that didn't even realize this was happening, and we had to tell them. And, because it was just so under the rug, pushed in bill that nobody even seen it coming. And then all of a sudden, I messaged Jennifer. I was like, did you see this? And then she got in touch with some other people, and I'll let her take over from there.
So we really got involved shortly before this bill was heard at the California Education Committee at the end of April. There was a group of us that went up to the Capitol for that hearing, and there was a large group of us that called in on the phone line for public comment. So that was really our first big, I would say, public opposition to the bill. It passed through that committee with amendments. It was voted through with amendments. So at that point was really when everything started happening for us and for our grassroots movement. So at that point, after the education committee hearing, and really a lot of what spurred it was a lot of us being able to listen in to the actual hearing. I had the privilege of, being able to be on the phone line and listen to it live as it was happening. So I got to hear a lot of the comment and the discussion surrounding it, and the author of the bill presenting it. And I know Maria had touched on it earlier that there were some untruths, and there were quite a few things that the author of this bill brought up in his presentation that, quite frankly, are just not, they're just not real. Things like that charter schools don't hire credentialed teachers. Well, that's just not true. And things like that, we don't take kids on IEPs. Again, that's just not true. But he stood at this committee hearing and said that, and I realized very quickly that all the other members of the education committee were none the wiser either. There was not one single one that could combat any of these untruths that were being said. So really, that got everybody motivated to really pull together and have our voice be heard. One congresswoman in particular, Megan Dolly, she had shared, she's from District 1, she had shared during the hearing that her nieces attended a non-classroom based charter in a neighboring county. And the author, Patrick O'Donnell of the bill, suggested that potentially her district was not monitoring the rules well enough, and that they were currently getting away with doing something that they shouldn't be doing, which again is just not true. So statements like that made it very apparent to us that these assembly members on the education committee who are making these decisions really just are basing it even on things that they are not even aware of. So we band together and got really motivated. Wendy Eklund of Legislation Take Action really spearheaded a big statewide movement. So she and Anastasia Stone and myself we met together and came up with some strategies. And so we're, like Maria said, we're asking for volunteers in every district. Right now, what everyone can be doing is contacting your local assembly member and just voicing your opinion, letting them know how this affects you, how this could affect your learners, how it affects somebody you know, how it could affect your small business, and just making sure that they're aware of how this could affect you. And then on a larger scale, the next hearing coming up is this Wednesday in 2 days at the Appropriations Committee. Now, we're unsure if it will actually be heard at the Appropriations Committee hearing or if it will be suspended. So it may or may not be discussed, but we are thinking that it will most likely be suspended and not discussed at this hearing. So for now, we're also really focusing on the Appropriations Committee members. So anybody who this affects and who opposes this bill, we just really encourage them, again, to contact your local assembly member and then contact the members of the Appropriations Committee and let them know how this may affect you.
So, so in our particular case, our assembly member would be Adam Gray. Out of curiosity, have you guys talked to him yet? And do you know what his sentiments are?
So Adam Gray, his position on the bill is he does support AB 1316. And we are trying to get into contact with him. I actually, for quite a few weeks now, have been calling and emailing multiple times. I did talk to one of his staff members and have been emailing with him, unfortunately to no response. But we are trying, we are calling. I let him know that I have a large number of families who are interested in all meeting together with him on a virtual call. I let him know, we did a Facebook video about the bill that got 8,000 views. And, there's a lot of people that want to talk to him and want our voices to be heard. So we are ready. We have all met. We met with many families, many local vendors, many businesses. We have a large group of families that are available to sit on a virtual call with him should he decide that he has time to hear us.
So, so one thing I find interesting about this was it says that it seems to specifically target charter schools that are non-classroom based, like you said. And so, one thing that I find interesting about that is, we're still technically in, the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the first things that happened is that classroom instruction came to an end. And I think that's one of the reasons why your homeschool co-op and why some of these charter schools became so popular, because they were already doing non-classroom based learning for a while and had already kind of gotten through those kind of things and learned the hiccups that come with it and such, and were doing it better than the public schools. And so a lot of parents chose to move their kids into that. But if for safety reasons or due to schedule reasons or what have you, a parent feels like the classroom-based system just isn't going to work for them. Maybe their child has like an autoimmune disorder or immune disorder. Maybe there's some other concerns, etc. I mean, this kind of sounds like it would take away that option. I feel like it sounds like overall they're thinking to themselves, classroom is preferable. And I think they want to do this because politically, I've seen at the state level, there's been kind of this attack on homeschooling in general. And some of it has come from recent interesting criminal cases, which are extremely few and far between. But there was the case where there was some children that were abused by their parents, and they made the argument. They said that basically this was only allowed to happen because of homeschooling. So there seems to be a kind of like an agenda to essentially really eliminate homeschooling in general or make it hard. I feel like a lot of the purpose behind this bill is really to make it financially difficult to do homeschooling because you have to have a classroom, which essentially makes it to where you have to have substantial amount of money to do this sort of thing. And the same thing with requiring credentialed teachers. There's already a shortage on teachers as is. So, I mean, that would also make that difficult. So, I think I could see that. I could also see how this would also serve in the interest of what the state level, like the teachers union, et cetera, that would basically want to keep a lot of that dollars into the public school system, and also would basically force people to have to go through the credentialing process like they have in order to get into the education field, if you will.
Yes, so I would very much agree with really you're spot on. The students who are with non-classroom based charters have a wide variety of reasons why they do not attend, and all of the ones that you listed. Plus, a big misconception is that non-classroom based charters do not accept students on IEPs, which we do. My specific charter, a large percentage of the students are children with exceptional needs and have IEPs. So a non-classroom based learning environment is really where they have opportunities to excel. I will further say that with the non-classroom based charters for homeschool families, a lot of us go with these charters because we do have access to a credentialed homeschool teacher that ensures that we are following all of the California standards. So we are not just out here on our own. And now to pull that from us, access to those kind of resources for, like I said, our children with exceptional needs, our children on IEPs, is really an atrocity. It's going to be very difficult for these students. And again, I just want to reiterate, we do have access and we are all assigned to credentialed teachers that work with us one-on-one every step of the way. And our additional vendors are those that we sometimes use that are, these non-credentialed teachers. But, I want to turn it over to Maria so she can discuss really the local impact. But the last thing I will say is that you are also very much correct. And I want to highlight the fact that a big part of this bill is trying to, in my opinion, trying to force families out of the homeschool world and back into the brick and mortar public school system. But the reality is that that is just not going to happen. Those of us that are using the non-classroom based charters, we use a lot of virtual learning, but we also use a lot of traditional homeschool tactics as well. We have a lot of hands-on learning going on at home. And, if our charter school is pulled, we will not go back to the brick and mortar. We will go on a PSA. And I just don't see how that is in the best interest of our learners and of our homeschool community to pull the resources that we so heavily rely on to educate our children. And to really just leave us out here on our own. But anyways, I want to definitely give Maria a chance to talk a little bit more about how this impacts us, on the local level.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback what both of you are saying, a lot of things, for a few years there was so many highlights of child abuse in the media, and they were homeschool families, and there was a lot of that going on, and I think that kind of piqued people's interest. But I also want people to understand that we are not like homeschooling has evolved so much that it's not just about, I'm keeping my children home to teach them a certain way. We have so many reasons why we homeschool. My daughter has an autoimmune disease. Right now she definitely isn't able to go to a brick and mortar school. My son is getting his IEP done and he does better with individualized learning. So I think a lot of this, people really need to do some research on what types of families go in homeschool, what type of parents are actually out there homeschooling. And I think that there is not a whole lot of research going on in that aspect. So we're kind of going on these, 1% things that happen. And, that's one thing that really affects us. So in local wise, this affects a lot of the kids, and especially in Los Banos. Our homeschool co-op is home to 187 families. And that equates to about 125 students that go to our co-op alone. And there's other co-ops in Los Banos that have other children. So you're talking hundreds of children will be displaced. And a lot of them need the services that charters are offering. Yes, it was stated by the assembly member during his little speech on April 28th that charter schools don't allow IEP students into charters, which was a extremely huge false statement. Los Banos alone are within our co-op. We have 40, 50 children that have IEPs that go through a charter. So all of our kids are going to be lacking services if there is no charter in this area. So that is a huge concern for us in this, specifically Los Banos, all of Merced County. So like Jennifer was saying, like here's Fresno County, we used to be able to go to any charter school in Fresno County if our county touched it. Same with Stanislaus County. We could go to any charter school there because our county touched it. This bill gets rid of all that. So it's not just Los Banos and Merced County. Look at any tiny little county. Those are the ones that are going to be affected the most by this bill because we don't have a charter school there and we would have to move. I'm not going to pick up my whole family and move. That shouldn't be the answer. For the small businesses in this area, we've talked to several. So I'd like to give you some information on the impact on those. In our Los Banos alone, we have 5 small businesses that use the parents use the funding for classes through them. So we have dance studios, art studios, music studios, Chinese. My husband's a tutor, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. With them having to be credentialed, and none of them are, over 60% of their income is from charter-based students that use their funding to pay for their classes. So just take a second and look at that. If you are a music teacher of 40 years, you didn't get credentialed, and all of a sudden all those charter students go, I talked to one of them and she said 60 to 70% of her business will be gone. She won't be able to sustain herself after a few years, so that business will eventually close down. Another example is my husband, who for both charter schools in this area, he's the tutor for them. Well, with this, he is not credentialed. However, he served with the United States Navy. He took a went to college for nuclear engineering. He has certificates from the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, yet he will not be able to teach math and science because no, he did not get his credential. He does have a bachelor's in teaching, but he did not get credentialed. So that's just like a few small businesses right here. And this bill would completely shut my husband's business down. So
Right.
it's a huge thing. Yes.
Right. So, I mean, if we talk about specifically like the credential process and what that's
Yep.
like, because I'm actually familiar with that myself, because I actually initially was going to be a history teacher, and I was working towards my single subject teaching credential. And, you know, there is the bachelor's degree component, the
Yep.
CBEST, and then the CSET. But there's also a period where you basically, for like a year, have to pretty much work for free as like a part-time like teacher's assistant or something to that effect. There are cases where you can get an exception and you can be how, how would I say and you can basically be like an interim teacher and
Yep.
fall under someone else. But there's different guidelines and stuff. And I guess what I'm essentially saying is that it's actually pretty financially difficult if you're not supported by someone else, because you most of the people I've talked to, what they're having to do is substitute teach as well as go through that time period. They're having to do other part-time jobs while they do that, and they also have to be supported. There's also a lot of studies that have said that one of the reasons why predominantly teachers are public school teachers are female is actually due to the kind of social paradigm that we have, where oftentimes the father, the husband, etc., will work, and then the woman stay home with the kids. And teaching opens up the idea of going to or basically working while the kids are gone, and then coming back. The idea, at least, is there. And to make a long story short, it does seem to kind of hold true. I think when we look at it, it makes it really difficult for someone if you are the say you're the primary breadwinner in your family. How are you going to stop work for essentially a year to earn this credential and teach under someone else? And maybe you've taught for years and years. You've done classes and courses and you've taught things before, but you just don't have this specific check in the box. You don't have this specific teaching credential. Well, now you can't teach.
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on that and, say that a lot of these vendors that we're talking about and a lot of these small businesses that we're talking about, the way they came to be and the way that they came on this path of teaching is that they started out as experts in the field. So they perhaps did go to college or did get a degree specifically in their passion and specifically in what they're teaching. And that's sort of the road they started at, 20 to 40 years ago when they were graduating high school and they were focusing on this area. And now they've come to a point in their lives where our learners are lucky enough that these people are taking their passion and something that they've done as a lifelong career and sharing their expertise and their experience and their stories and their wealth of knowledge from living and breathing these subjects. And really that is the fabric of the homeschool world, is that we prioritize exciting learning and firing up that excitement and engagement. And we believe that the number one way for educators to do that is to teach your passion and to love what you're doing and love the subject. And that is infectious to our learners. And that's how these educators are able to spark such a passion. And so the reality is that a lot of them did not go to school for 2 years to get that teaching credential. They spent their lifetime living and breathing the subject. And now we are lucky enough that they will impart that passion on our learners. And so for a lot of them, that's how they came to be. And for us, my high schooler learning chemistry from somebody who has lived and breathed the field and worked in labs and has hands-on experience. I put a lot of value on that over somebody who, has just graduated, but technically has a degree slapped to their name. I'd rather educate my children through the experience and the passion than, the 2 years of training. So that's why we really value the educators that we use. And this bill will really, virtually change the essence and the philosophy behind how we educate our children.
Right. Well, I think if we think about, what is the goal of education, as a society, there's different philosophies on that, of course. But if one of our ideas is we want to prepare our kids for the workforce, if that's at least one of them, I think a lot of people would hold that as a concept, then it makes sense to be trained or taught by people who have worked in that field. Because you bring up a valid point. It is rather ironic, and you even see this really in college too, where many professors are those who've just graduated and taught and just learned the things, and now they're regurgitating what the professor said, but they have no actual real world experience in their field doing that job, doing that kind of thing. I experienced that a lot myself and thought that was kind of humorous. One thing I find really funny was, business, right? Business school. How many professors are teaching you how you could make money? And there's a part of you that wants to go, well, why don't you take this knowledge and you go off and have a successful business and make this money? Why are you sitting here teaching me about these things and you don't, have a business yourself? It doesn't make sense when you think about it, but it's kind of humorous. But we do see that dynamic at play. But I think so. if we're talking here locally specific, recently it's come up at our school board meetings, the idea that we've had a declining enrollment and how this is financially impacting our school's budget. And school systems across the state, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, have been concerned with declining enrollment. Now, I think on one hand, we could say, well, perhaps this is competition, right? If the charter schools are doing a better job and they're winning over more of the students per se, then that would incentivize maybe the public schools to do better in order to try to win them back. But it sounds like instead the plan is well, let's just eliminate the charter school's ability to take the kids, and then that solves that problem of declining enrollment. So I guess kind of what I'm saying is, what would you say to individuals who say that as more students take charter schooling up as opposed to public school, that it perhaps hurts students in public school because it's taking away funding from them? What would be your response to that?
I think personally, I think that my child shouldn't have a dollar sign attached to their head when they're walking around. You know, I've said that many times. Like I feel like, okay, I'm letting down the public schools by doing what's right for my child and specifically. So we're looked down upon because we have chosen a different path for our children. And to me, that just sits so wrong that it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be, okay, your son is worth $4,000 a year and your daughter's worth $4,000 a year and they're not coming to my school. I just feel like so disheartened by that sentiment because you're talking about choice and the ability to make the right decisions. And let's face it, not every child can make it in a public school setting. They do better at home. I think during COVID, a lot of families have seen that, whoa, my kid is soaring at home. You know, I've had so many emails, so many messages over the past year and a half how, okay, I've tried homeschooling and my child is actually reading 2 grades above now. My child is doing better in math now. How can I do this full time? I mean, it's just, unfortunately, people are seeing that, you know, maybe they are better at home. And yes, that is taking away funding from the public schools. But shouldn't that be a budget issue, not a, okay, you have decided to take your child out of public school and be looked down upon by making that decision? I think it should be like, we should make sure all of our teachers are paid, no matter how many students are in that classroom. And that's a whole nother bag of squirrels there, right? But to me, I don't know, Jennifer, you can add on, but to me, I feel like my kids shouldn't have a price tag. It should be what's best for them. Especially during COVID, there's no way my daughter would have been able to go to any school because of her autoimmune disease. She wouldn't have made it out. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So, Jennifer, what do you have to add to that part?
Yeah, I would like to, I think it's really important in answering this question. You pose the question of basically, what would you say to people who question the funding and the funds coming from the public schools to us? And I think it's really important for people to understand that when we talk about getting these educational funds, these funds are, these non-classroom based charters are public schools. We're authorized by public schools. So our students are public school learners, just like brick and mortar. The difference is we're non-classroom as opposed to brick and mortar. So students who attend these brick and mortar public schools get all these things afforded for them without their parents digging into their pockets. So they get their textbooks, they get their workbooks, they get their worksheets from their teachers, they get their desks, they get their pens and their papers, they get their iPads or their Chromebooks, they get their music class, they get their PE class, they get their science experiments, they get their hands-on stuff, they get their field trips, all their assemblies, all these various things that are provided for brick and mortar public school children are all things that our non-classroom based children should also receive. They should also receive these things through their educational journey. And just because we are a non-classroom based charter as opposed to a brick and mortar public school does not mean that our children should lack these experiences. So whereas these quote unquote educational funds are already built into the brick and mortar public system and these kids are afforded these things in their school day, our kids do their school day at home, but should still be afforded the experience of being part of a school play every year. So we use our funds to sign them up for a theater class. They should also be able to experience art class, once every 2 weeks or once a week or whenever they get them in the brick and mortar public schools. So we use our educational funds to pay for those classes so our children can also go with other kids and take these art classes or these music classes or choir. So I think it's really important to highlight that our educational funds are used to provide experiences for our at-home learning children that public school children in brick and mortar schools receive also free of charge to the families.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like yeah, essentially what you're saying is you don't feel it's fair that there should be a stigma placed on you or your child if you choose to not go to public school because there's a price tag associated essentially with your child. And society or some individuals want to think, oh, you're selfish for not throwing your money into the pot with everyone else over here. But as I was listening to you guys talking and thinking to myself, something that kind of came to my mind was we talk about one of the ways that we can essentially make our education system better. And it's no surprise that California, we're actually one of the worst states in the nation in terms of our education. But I think it would be different if we had this amazing education system that was the envy of the nation and they were begging you to come in. But the fact that locally in Los Banos, ours is ranked pretty poorly actually among the state. And then on top of that, our state's ranked really poorly among the nation. So you can do the conclusions there and connect those dots. But long story short, I guess what I'm saying is reducing teacher to student ratio. You would think that actually taking out students and then bringing them to a charter school would actually further achieve that goal because it would reduce the amount of students, say, in the classroom, and that would be a good thing. But you're right, definitely. I mean, when I sit there and I listen to school board meetings, which I always do, and a budget comes up a lot, but particularly, I mean, talking about enrollment declining and the money, right? It's constantly talking about that aspect of it. And I think one thing we've learned is that you can throw a lot of money at education, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a good education. A lot of it has to do with the quality, what's being taught in the time. I've seen there's some charter schools that do bilingual education, which I think is really cool, where the students learn Spanish and English. And I've seen where they do with Chinese or French, other language, Mandarin, um, and different things. But I think we can, I guess it's really more of a question of two things is one, do we want diversity of education and ability to learn different things, or do we want it to where everyone has to learn the same exact things? And I guess the other question that we're asking ourselves is state versus parental, control. To what extent do we think it makes sense for the state to supersede? And by state, I mean government, not literally California, but it could be that way too. But the state to supersede the ability of parents to decide what's right for their kids. I mean, there's certainly cases where parents take it too far, I think, and that there's times when you want the state to step in. I get that, but I guess it's kind of a balance, and I guess you guys would essentially probably say that this crosses the line or kind of goes too far into trying to take away your ability to make educational decisions for your kids.
Well, and let me just point out before we get too far with that, when you are with a charter, you still have state standards that you still have the same state tests that the public school does. All of that is still there. We get these checklists and things like that from the charter to make sure that, we all know all these things that the charters or that the public schools do as well. So we're not really that much different. It's just we are at home. And yes, we have the time to add to what those state standards are. So yes, if I'm doing all my state standards for English, math, science, and social studies, but my son is really into robotics, well, guess what? We have time to take a robotics class. We have the time to focus on art classes. We have the time to go and learn Mandarin together. And that, that's the thing is people think that we're out there just teaching whatever we want, and that's just not true. We have to have our curriculum approved before we can use it. It has to be secular, just like public school. So I think there's like a little misnomer there about how, oh, you are homeschooling, you're not going by the same standards as my child is at the public school. Well, actually, yes, we are. So I just want to say that because I think that is a little bit like so many people come to me and say, well, what do you teach? And it's like, well, what do you mean? What do I teach? Like, we do the same things. It's just our children may not do well with Common Core math, so we teach a different way. But guess what? They get the same, same testing, same answers.
Right. So I think one of the things that's kind of really, I think if we were to really test these theories, right, these ideas that people have about homeschool children versus public school children, is we'd really, I guess we could look at to say, well, what's the end result, right? How do they perform on their SAT, ACT? How do they do when they go to college? What's the percentage of them that go to college and such? And I know with you guys specifically in your homeschool co-op, there's some students you have that have earned, what was it, their associate's degree, I think, prior to
Before
actually.
even leaving high school. Yes. I mean, we have ninth grader that he can speak 4 different languages and he goes to the college here. I mean, and he's only in ninth grade. So yeah, a lot of kids end with an associate's degree and a high school diploma when you are a homeschooler because you have that time to do that.
So I'll just chime in really fast on that as well and just say, in recent times, I actually have had quite a few conversations with people who work in college admissions. And, these days, homeschool and charter school families are getting the deserved recognition in that world that they should be getting. A lot of these college admissions staff are finding that kids that are coming into college from traditional brick and mortar schools, they all look the same. All their transcripts are the same. Their classes are the same. Their experiences are the same classes, the same education. It's 4 years of everybody's the same and taking the same things. And then they get these applications from homeschool kids and charter school kids that not only did they also meet every single one of those same classes and complete every single one of those same classes and do all of that, but then they're also coming in with career training. And that is a big one. So I really want to highlight that colleges are finding that homeschool learners are more prepared. They are ready on more of a global level. They understand how to work independently. They don't need their hand held through things. They are ready to go. They're ready to get the work done. They're ready to be responsible, be held accountable. And again, they're just finding that they have a much more well-rounded and much more worldly type of an education, which is a lot of what colleges and really workforces are looking for. People who have the ability and the comfort level to communicate and collaborate really on a global level. So it's very exciting time right now for homeschool families. I really do feel like they're starting to get a lot of the recognition they deserve. I've been a part of a lot of conversations with people in higher education that are sort of scratching their heads, wondering why we don't have more of this micro school idea, why our younger learners K through 12 are not getting more specialized education, because clearly the pandemic has shown us that that's what works. You even have traditional educators talking about how the pandemic has provided them more one-on-one communication with the kids because you're forced to meet like this, more virtually and on Zoom, and it forces you to focus in on one child at a time, when you have to meet more one-on-one. So, our homeschool kids are very much prepared for the real world and for college, and are certainly getting the recognition that they deserve these days.
So I guess one of the things, and a lot of this kind of has to go with concerns that people would just have about homeschooling in general and how that plays into the public mindset when we talk about this bill and the feeling for the need for it. But I guess one of the things that I'm thinking of is commonly people would think to themselves, I don't want to homeschool because I don't want my kids to only know what I know or to only get what I get. So I think that's a common sentiment. What would you say to that kind of sentiment?
I get that question a lot in just in the co-op in general. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jennifer, but we get a lot like I'm not good at math. What do I do? That's what the charters are here for. I mean, they will give us tools to use on things that we don't know what we're doing. But what's beautiful about the journey is you're learning it with your child. Maybe you missed something in your own education that you were like always wondering about. Well, guess what? You're relearning everything with them, and it's a beautiful thing. We have a few parents that have gone and gotten their GED just because this gave them so much confidence in themselves that they actually went out and got their GED because they brushed up on all of their skills while teaching their child. That in and of itself is amazing. But you don't have to be well rounded in everything. There's so many things that are out there, out school, that we use for stuff that we just were like, yeah, I don't know about that. So we sign them up for a class with somebody that can teach them that. We have tutors that can help. Our accredited teachers give us tools like, apps and things like that can sharpen skills. So that's another great thing. By being able to work one on one with your child, you know exactly where they lack, where they need help. But if they were in a classroom with 30 kids, that teacher might miss that. Not saying that they're not wonderful as well, but it's hard. It's hard to have that many kids in a class. So you might miss a little bit. But when I'm sitting here with my son or my daughter, I'm like, oh, we got to work on that. That's not, we got to focus on that until we get there. So we can see those things, pinpoint those things beforehand. But we have so many tools in assistance with the charters that help us when we need that extra help.
Does this bill strike you as partisan? And by that, I mean, does it seem like majority, say, Democrats support it, or majority Republicans support it, or what have you? I could
Yes.
guess, but
Yes, 100%. It is a very black and white down party lines. Democrats support the bill, Republicans do not. So yes, it is very much a partisan bill. That is for sure.
in terms of the origins of this bill, is it? I mean, how much do we know about where it really came from? Does it have to do with, say, maybe teachers' unions? Does it have to do with, say, a particular political party, a particular organization? Do you know much about the origin of the?
Yes, I do. So it was very apparent at the education hearing that most of this bill, if not all of the bill, is based off of the situation of A3 in San Diego. There was some fraud occurring, some financial fraud occurring in one of the charter schools in San Diego, and to be quite honest with you, again, it was charter schools who blew the whistle on that because we did not want a bad name for all the every single other charter school that's playing by the rules and doing things the way they should be. We did not want one situation to mar the name of charter schools. So really, charter schools were the ones who blew the whistle on San Diego. It was not the government, it was not politicians, it was not the public brick and mortar schools, it was charter schools who brought it to light. And it was one specific situation. And at the education hearing, it was brought up numerous times over and over again. And, Patrick O'Donnell was actually asked at the hearing, so besides the situation in San Diego, besides A3, are there other charter schools that are being investigated for this kind of fraud? And his response was, I cannot say. I cannot speak on that and I cannot say. And then they came back with, can you not say because you are not at liberty to say, you are not able to say, or can you not say because there are no other cases? And his only response was, I cannot say. So we thought it, and it became very obvious that yes, a lot of it is based on that one situation. Now I want to bring up Senate Bill 593. So this Senate bill actually does very specifically address fiscal responsibility in non-classroom based charters. So it is, in my very strong opinion, that this bill does really address the financial fraud situation and preventing that from happening. And basically what it says is that every single year, non-classroom based charter staff who are in charge of doing all the financial auditing and reporting will have to all go through the same training every year over again before they do the reporting. So I forget what exactly it is, but there is basically a financial accountability like task force kind of a team, and they would basically be responsible for administering a certain number of hours every single year to these employees who are in charge of this for the charters to ensure that they are responsibly auditing and reporting the yearly financial reports. And so I believe that that bill does address the concerns with the fraud and the financial responsibility with non-classroom based charters and holding us accountable for how we spend our educational funds and how the money is used. But it is not a kitchen sink bill like AB 1316 that addresses one part of that, but then also addresses attendance minutes, the attending the neighboring county, what vendors we use, reducing the amount of educational funds. There are so many other things that are very unrelated that are all thrown into AB 1316 that all either pass or don't pass. But Senate Bill 593 specifically only addresses the financial accountability for non-classroom based charters.
So, I mean, it sounds like Senate Bill 593 is a more surgical or targeted uh, to deal with that one specific issue. And then AB 1360 kind of is more of, it's like that financial situation is almost kind of a Trojan horse to deal with other aspects of homeschooling that are disliked or perceived to be as an issue, etc. But I guess, and I was thinking to myself while you were talking, well, with public schooling too, I mean, not all schools really manage their funding all that well either. There's some schools that are totally broke, that are deficit spending, that are basically bankrupt. There's corruption even in public schools at times, and independent vendors and contracts, supply even everything from even like school lunch and such. And so it's hard to, there's a lot of money in that too. So it's hard to say, what I mean, I'm not saying no to transparency. Of course, it's good to have that transparency and such. But I guess what I'm saying is moving it from that to the public school, does it necessarily solve that problem of ending the idea of mismanagement of funds? And I guess I would say it doesn't seem to, because we still have mismanagement of funds even in public school as well. So I think that's kind of a fallacy that's kind of being pushed, is that the government is immune to mismanagement of fund or bad budget practice. So I think another interesting thing of this is, I guess people kind of, there's this dislike of anything that is perceived to be like for profit, or anything that's perceived to be a business, etc. But I think that's kind of a misnomer around charter schools. I mean, really, the money is just put back into the kids, right? My understanding is they're not even like for-profit businesses. They're just simply like a public school, like any other public school.
Yes, absolutely. So non-classroom based charters are public charters. They are charter schools that are authorized through traditional public schools. So they operate, Maria kind of touched on it too. They operate virtually very similarly with the exception of location of learning. And I in addition to, what you were saying about it almost gives this idea that these public schools are immune to misspending money, and they don't have the same issues. In addition to that, I also want to point out that when they talk about not using credentialed teachers, Traditional public schools hire tutors all the time, and they are on the school district's payroll, and they are paid through the school district, and they are not credentialed. Paraprofessionals that work in the exceptional needs classes, the only requirement is a high school diploma or a GED. They do not have to have a college degree. They don't have to have a teaching credential, but they are working one-on-one with kids inside the classroom, and they are being paid by the school district. So to say that these kinds of staff and employees that are non-credentialed teachers can be paid for to help as a resource for the children in brick and mortar classes, but we cannot provide for our learners, a 40 plus year experience industry professional, just simply because we educate at home, but we are part of the public school system.
I'd like to do this. So before we sign off and conclude this interview, is there anything else you would like to say?
I just want to encourage everybody. There's a Facebook page, legislation, take action. That is where you're going to find literally everything. We have mapped out, you can copy and paste the letters into your emails. We've made it so simple. There are phone scripts for you. For when you call, you don't know what to say, well, we're going to help you. There's scripts that you can use. You can edit them, add to them, whatever it takes. I've called Adam Gray's office several times. It takes less than a minute. They usually answer fairly quickly. They listen to what you have to say. They take note of it. And at the end of the day, they write down 150 people oppose AB 1316, 26 are for it, and they give that information. So if you don't think a simple phone call helps, it does, because your voice will be heard, because it is a tally point that will be given to your assembly member. So, but also if you don't know who your assembly member is and you're outside of our District 21, legislation take action has a little clicky link there, and they'll help you figure out who your assembly member is. Right now, every week we put up, hey, this is what we're concentrating on this week. Do these following things. And we have, copy and paste everything right there for you. So I really encourage everybody, hop on that Facebook page, legislation take action, and follow us. Take those moments. I also personally have outlined, to make things easier, I put all of the appropriations committee members right in a post and a sample letter right there. So you guys can just copy and paste it right off of my post, and it's a public post. So we've made it even that easy. People don't even have to, they don't have to be nervous about it. They don't have to think about it. Very, very quick. And we really need volunteers. Why do we need volunteers? We need people that can get on these big calls. So let's say we finally get a meeting with Adam Gray. We're going to blast text all the volunteers and say, hey, jump on with us for this meeting so you can be a part of it. That's what we need. And we need numbers. We need people to understand that school of choice is important, even if it's not your child. Wonder if your child fell ill or something else and he can no longer go to public school. You need options too. So it doesn't just affect homeschoolers. So please, everybody go on that page, fill out the volunteer form. We do not do absolutely anything with your information. Actually, if you live in Central Valley, Jennifer's the only one allowed to see your information. That is how tight knit this is. So we only have 3 individuals that will ever see your information, and that's from Northern, Central, and Southern. So we're not going to use that for anything else besides emailing you saying, hey, we're going to get on a Zoom call tonight, or texting you an emergency meeting is coming. That's all it's for. But we need people, and come fight with us. Come fight with us.
I just want to really thank you, Justin, for taking the time and for allowing us to come on here. We just feel very passionately about this. And, our hope is just that anybody on our local level that is, close to us, that's interested and or wondering sort of what they can do, can connect with us. We're here to help, and we're here to talk to, anybody that opposes the bill and this could affect, and, to join in with us. So again, just thank you so much for making the time for us. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
And thank you so much for coming on. So once again, folks, we talked about Assembly Bill 1316 and how it's going to impact the local Los Banos community and specifically the Los Banos local homeschool co-op. If you haven't already, please like, follow, subscribe to Los Banos Talk. We have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, losbanostalk.com. You can become a supporter of Los Banos Talk for just $4.99 a month and gain access to all the videos first and ad-free, plus gain access to behind-the-scenes bonus exclusive content and opinion pieces. Once again, my name is Justin Collins, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.